Hey, how's it going? It's good to see people logging into the class. Good to see some familiar names and some new ones. So, I am Dr. Amanda Ryan Fear, and I help high achieving women who are feeling overwhelmed, unfulfilled, and anxious figure out what they really want from life and then build the confidence to get it. So, this class is called How to Solve Any Problem. And basically, if you are a human, you have a human brain, and therefore you have problems because we tend to overcomplicate things, and life hands us problems. So, whether it's a problem of our own making or a problem outside of us, we're going to get to the bottom of some problem solving. So throughout this class, we're going to do a combination of Q&A. You'll have some time to do some activities. So if you have a specific problem that you're trying to solve, or if you just would like some tools for any problem that comes up in your life, you are in the right place. So first, there are some common things that people do when they have a problem. They get afraid, right? We tend to resist anything that we've identified as a problem, or they get uncomfortable and just wish it would go away. They feel that they have to come up with an answer and it has to be the right answer, or they look for someone to blame. And sometimes that can be themselves. And so none of these problem solving activities is actually going to solve your problem. But what happens is that being faced with a problem becomes a problem in and of itself, right? So in this class, you're going to learn how to solve problems without all of the mental drama that comes up whenever we learn to identify something as a problem. So the first thing you have to know and learn is what is actually the problem. So oftentimes just getting specific about what the problem is and understanding how we think about the problem, making sure you can see my visual aid there. How you think about the problem can be more important than the problem itself. So many people go through their lives ignoring, avoiding, or resisting problems until they get too big to solve without a lot of unneeded suffering. So the first step is always identifying and naming the problem. So how you think about your problem, I'll say it again because it's important, is much more important than the problem itself. So what I'd like you to do is if you had a chance to print out the accompanying workbook for this class, awesome, you can do it in this or just in a Google Doc or in a journal, wherever you would like to do some writing. I'd like you to take a minute to write out your problem without editing or censoring. So I call this a download. There's something extremely powerful about just getting all of our thoughts out into one space, out of our heads and onto the page. So right now, just start writing. Include everything that comes to mind when you think about your problem. So do that now. Everything that comes to mind, all of the thoughts when you think about your problem. Okay. So if you are watching the recording, we're going to have a recorded version of this and you still need more time, feel free to press pause. But folks who are with me live, let's move on. So now you have your problem down on paper and I want you to take a deep breath, right? Because just acknowledging that we have a problem can be really scary in and of itself. So all problems can be simplified and categorized into one of 5 categories. So first, we have to understand what those categories are and how they're defined. So let's see. For those of you who have worked with me before, you're probably familiar with this list of categories. This is called the model, and it's, okay. There we go. See, I have a problem. Okay, this is the model, and this was created by the founder of the Life Coach School, Brooke Castillo. And it's a great way to categorize multiple things that are happening in our lives. So the model includes circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, and results. Circumstances are facts. They're not up for interpretation. I like to say that circumstances are data. So in theory, if you have a circumstance, you could share it with a room full of people and they would all agree, yeah, that's the circumstance. Circumstances are inherently neutral, and I'll explain that more in a second. So a circumstance could be, my husband said the words, please unload the dishwasher. Okay. I could show you a video recording of that. I could show you a transcript, and a room full of people would agree, yeah, those were the words that he said. Circumstances are inherently neutral, and we don't feel an emotion about a circumstance until we think a thought about that circumstance. So thoughts are sentences in your mind about the circumstances. Okay, so circumstances are data, thoughts are drama. Circumstances are facts, thoughts are stories. Then, when you think a thought about something, that creates a feeling, an emotion in your body. And all a feeling is a description of a vibration in your body caused by thoughts. So you see how this model builds upon itself? And because humans are emotionally driven animals, meaning that our brains are programmed to avoid negative emotion, seek out pleasurable emotion, and also not expend energy. Our brains like to conserve energy. All of our actions are driven by wanting to feel good, avoid feeling bad, and exert minimal effort. So all of our actions are driven by emotions. Actions are what we do. They include reactions, actions, or inactions. And then results are the effects of our actions. So here's how this plays out. You have a circumstance, right? That's inherently neutral. It's just facts. My husband says the words, please unload the dishwasher. Then your brain gives you all of these thoughts about the circumstance. Circumstance could be, my boss sent me an email saying, hey, could we meet up after 5 p.m.? Then you have all of these thoughts. Thoughts create emotions in your body. Emotions cause you to act either to get more of a positive emotion or less of a negative emotion. And from all of our actions, we get results. So really, all of the results we get in our lives map back to thoughts. So when you look at a problem, you'll most likely see it as a circumstance problem, right? My problem is the septic tank on our farm is broken. It's not. My brain was like, don't even say it. I'll make it happen. But I was thinking that that would be a concrete problem, right? That's a circumstance in and of itself. Let's think of another one. Like, problem could be, I have $20 in my checking account. Now, I could show you my bank balance. Again, fictional problem, but I could show you my bank balance. I could show it to a room full of people, and some of the people would be like, sweet, you have $20. Other people would be like, oh my gosh, how are you going to pay any bills? Other people would be like, oh, that's interesting. You know, so just because it's a circumstance doesn't mean it's a problem. It's our thoughts about the circumstance that make it a problem. Most everyone, when they're new to this work, they think problems are facts. They think problems in and of themselves are circumstances. So the first step we need to take is to separate out the facts. Separate out what is a fact, what is data, from the drama. So now I want you to go back to what you wrote about your problem and take out everything that's a fact, meaning you could show it to a room full of people and they would all agree, yes, that's the fact. So any adjectives, any judgments, anything that can be open to interpretation needs to be left off of your list. So what you can do is go back through what you wrote and underline, highlight, circle, whatever makes most sense for you, all the facts, okay? So go ahead and take a minute to do that. Okay. So what you'll find is even if you filled your entire paper with the story of the problem, your circumstances, your facts are probably going to be very few, like 1 to 5. What's actually a fact? So some examples of facts are the man said words. I have a job. I have a husband. Anything that you could show a room full of people and they would all agree, yeah, those are the facts. Okay, so now when you look over the facts of your problem, you'll realize that your problem is not actually a factual circumstance. Circumstances in and of themselves are not problems. Okay, so the fact that on your bank statement, it shows you have $20 in your checking account, that in and of itself is not a problem. It's not until you think a thought about that circumstance that it becomes a problem. Nothing in the external world that is factual becomes a problem until we place meaning or judgment on it. So I want you to really think about that. Just because something happened or something is happening, it's not actually a problem until you think a thought about it, because your thoughts are what put judgment, put meaning, put interpretation on it. Okay. So having $20 in your bank account is not a problem until you make it mean something, like believing that you won't be able to eat, that you're going to be in debt, or you're not responsible. Debt in and of itself is not a problem. And we go into this when I teach about money mindset in my group coaching course. But there's the fact, and then there's what you make it mean. The same goes for job losses, death, divorce, injury. None of these facts are ever a problem until we add meaning to it. So how do we know this? If circumstances in and of themselves were problems, then everyone would have the same experience for every circumstance. But we don't. We all experience circumstances differently because we all apply meaning differently, right? Does that make sense? So one person's death might mean everything to you, but might mean very little to someone else. So look at the facts, the circumstances of your problem, and remember that the facts in and of themselves are never the problem. Okay? So next you want to identify your thoughts. Thoughts are always the cause of your problem. It's always our thinking and what our brain makes things mean. So go back to your problem page and pull out all of the thoughts. So you can either rewrite it, you can highlight it, you can underline it, whatever you did. So thoughts are emotionally charged. So when you think them, you'll feel an emotion. Thoughts are stories. Thoughts are not facts. So go back to your problem page right now and pull out all the thoughts that you have. Okay. Remember that thoughts are just sentences in your mind. So they include opinions, judgments, conclusions, ideas, or related statements. So it's important to notice the difference between the facts you listed and the thoughts you listed, because your thoughts and feelings are the real problem. Your thoughts and the feelings caused by those thoughts are actually why you think you have a problem. Most of us spend so much of our lives trying to get away from feeling uncomfortable emotions that we label things problems that maybe are, maybe aren't. And at this point, you might think that this is just semantics, but it's really the first step to understanding any problem. It makes me think of, I'm trying to think of what it is. It's a story, but it's basically about a man and his son. I think it's a farmer and his son. And of course it's males because patriarchy, but something about the fact that like the man's rice crop doesn't come to fruition one year and all of the other farmers are like, oh, that's too bad. That's awful. And the man's like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. We'll find out. And then war comes to their town, and during the rice harvest, his son had injured himself. And when the son had injured himself, the man, everyone was like, oh my gosh, that's so awful. Your son injured himself. And the man's like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So then when young men are starting to be drafted to fight in this war, since the son is injured, he doesn't get drafted. And everyone says, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's so great that your son wasn't drafted. And then the man says, maybe so, maybe not. And I really need to look this story up because I refer to it in my coaching a lot. And I know that every time I just completely mangle it. But you get the idea, right? Like we don't ever know if something's a problem or not until we think a thought about it. So what's most important to realize is that thoughts about the problem are the real problem. And the beauty of that is that you control your thoughts. You can't control what other people do. You can't control what happens to you. You can't control what doesn't happen to you, but you can control what happens in your brain. And so this idea is actually super liberating. Okay. So on the next page, on a new page, I want you to write about all of the reasons that you are choosing to think about your problem in the way that you're choosing to think about it. So what I mean is, why are you choosing to think these thoughts? How are these thoughts impacting you? Can you see any other options for how you might think? Why or why not? All right. So the question becomes, what do you really want? So now that you understand your brain and your thoughts are the problem, you need to see why they're the problem and how they're giving you something that you don't want. So thoughts, the thoughts we think, which are all optional, cause our emotions. So when we think an angry thought, we have an angry feeling. Likewise, when we think a joyous thought, we have a joyous feeling. So all problems are really problems of emotions. Meaning the reason that we don't want to have what we think are problems is because the way we feel when we're having them. So I want you to think about that. Like I'll give you a minor example in my life is my group coaching program. My newest cohort meets on Thursday evenings. And so we have a group coaching call, and the first one for this cohort is this Thursday. Well, that's also at the same time that I'm getting my second COVID shot. And so in my brain, I was like, okay, well, that stinks because I don't want to miss this first call because I've been looking forward to it. And I know that the ladies in my group have been too. And also it's really important for me to honor obligations and what's on my calendar. So my brain is like, this is a problem because you can't be in two places at once. Because I also really would like to get my second COVID shot. And so my brain went through all of the things that brains do when we decide that we have a problem. And the first thing was maybe if I just ignore it, it'll go away or something will change. Right. And then I started to feel uncomfortable. And then because I don't like to feel uncomfortable, I started thinking all of these other things about this problem and what I made it mean. And so by trying to avoid the discomfort, I didn't actually get into problem solving mode for my problem, for what I decided was a problem. So anyway, because I wanted to avoid this uncomfortable feeling, and part of that feeling was shame because I was having the thought like, how could I have scheduled my COVID shot when I have this group program happening? Well, when I scheduled the COVID shot like 2 months ago, this iteration, this cohort, this group wasn't even scheduled yet, right? And so, but my brain was like, you should have known, you should have predicted the future. And so I decided it was a problem. And anyway, fast forward, I came up with a solution. I have a dear friend of mine who is going to guest coach from my coaching program. But anyway, trying to avoid the feeling of discomfort and shame for having the problem in the first place cost me a lot of time and energy that I didn't need to spend on that. So all of our problems are feeling problems, meaning the reason we don't want to have problems is because the way we feel when we're thinking about our problems. Okay, so I want you to think about your current problem. And I know I've gotten a couple of comments. What if I don't have an example problem right now to work with? And that's fine. Just think about a problem you've had in the past, or you could even think of a hypothetical problem. So then think about the thoughts you have about that problem and ask yourself how you feel when you think those thoughts. Okay. So remember, feelings are one word descriptions of vibrations in our bodies. We tend to think that feelings are going to be the end of us. Nobody likes to feel shame. Nobody likes to feel discomfort. People usually don't like to feel anger, but they aren't going to kill us. And in my program and in my coaching, I teach how to actually process an emotion, both physically and mentally, to get to the other side. So you can start to realize that emotions aren't problems in and of themselves. Emotions are just feelings in our bodies. And really, the more that we can understand that and know that we can feel an uncomfortable emotion and be okay, really, nothing can stop us. Nothing becomes a problem because emotions are no longer a problem. Does that make sense? So in your workbook, there's a feelings list. If you don't have the workbook, you can easily Google feelings wheel or emotions wheel and come up with a whole awesome list of emotions. So at this point, what most people do is you immediately dismiss the idea of feelings being the problem, or you want to change your circumstance or change your thought immediately. Which totally makes sense, right? Like if the whole problem is that I don't want to feel this emotion, why wouldn't I change the circumstance or change my thought about it so I don't have to feel this emotion? But I want you to slow down. Um, let's see. I want you to slow down just a little bit and teach you about the power of awareness. So when you're having a problem, your first reaction is going to try to be to change and control the circumstances. We spend so much of our time and energy trying to change everything outside of us, trying to change other people and what they're thinking, trying to change what other people do, trying to change the weather. We spend so much time trying to change things. And that's not possible. We cannot control other people. We can influence them, but we can't control them, nor can we control the weather or external circumstances. If you could, that wouldn't be a bad way to solve problems, right? Like I had $20 in my checking account and I decided that was a problem and I could change that, I would have all of the money in my checking account, right? But unfortunately, that's not how it works. So as soon as you change circumstances, if you could, it would make it that much easier to change your thoughts and your feelings. But more often than not, you won't be able to control the circumstance. And that's where the skill of awareness can be a game changer. So by knowing that the problem is really the way you feel and that your feelings are caused by your thoughts, you can use awareness to get relief by witnessing the cause and effect of your problem. So this is a skill, and I don't let the simplicity of it detract from how powerful that can be. So by witnessing how you're feeling, you get a moment of not feeling it. You become the watcher, right? For anyone who's familiar with meditation, the whole idea that you can be outside of your thoughts or be the one witnessing or watching your thoughts is really powerful. You get a moment of not feeling the feeling because you're witnessing it. It taps into the part of you that's actually bigger than the problem. This taps into the part of you that isn't bogged down with the problem and is creative and wise, a much better problem solver than you resisting negative emotion. So let's imagine, I like to use this example because it's really concrete, but I just realized that if you don't drive, maybe it's not that concrete. But let's imagine you're driving down the freeway and somebody cuts in front of you really close, like within 2 feet. Notice how I was facty. There's data there, right? 2 feet, you're driving, you're on the freeway, somebody cuts in front of you. So that's the circumstance. And then your thought is, oh my gosh, this is dangerous. And the emotion that elicits is fear, right? So you could spend your time resisting the fear, getting angry, but that doesn't help with problem solving. Once you realize that you aren't at the mercy of your emotions and you can actually feel your emotions and be okay with that, then you can pop into problem solving mode. So being able to witness, and granted, now that I'm thinking about it, this example isn't that amazing because usually you're in reactionary mode when you're in danger. So Anyway, I digress. But you get the idea. If you're able to witness, oh, okay, so this thing happened, this circumstance happened, and I'm having this thought about it, which is creating this emotion in my body. And then just being aware of it gives you so much power because now you're witnessing that that's happening rather than reacting to it. Does that make sense? So now comes the time where I have to remind you of something super important, because when most of my clients learn that they are actually in control of their thinking and their feeling, so their thoughts and emotions, they tend to go into beating themselves up mode. So a reminder, do not beat yourself up. Yeah, I'm seeing some laughter in the comments. Once you start understanding that you're thinking, that the thoughts that you're thinking ultimately cause your problems, you might be tempted to get mad at yourself for doing this. Don't. There's no upside to any further resistance or being upset with yourself, being angry with yourself. No one teaches you this, right? It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you, and it doesn't mean you aren't a brilliant and amazing human being. It just means that you have a human brain, and your brain is efficient in repeating patterns that until now you haven't even been aware of, right? Your brain is just doing its job. So be nice to yourself, be compassionate to yourself. If you want to solve your problem, you'll need to decide how it is that you want to feel instead of the way you're feeling now. So at this point, you might argue that you need to keep feeling bad or you won't fix the problem, right? This is where a lot of my clients lobby for the voice of their inner critic. That voice that's inside of your head that's really mean to you. Some of my clients are like, but if I didn't have that voice, I would never get anything done. And that's kind of similar logic to problem solving. Like if I didn't feel crappy, I would never solve the problem. Well, that's not actually true. Like we don't have to feel crappy to try to solve a problem, right? I have $20 in my bank account. I've decided that's a problem because my electricity bill was $350 last month. Yeah, that's a true story. I live on a farm. So electricity is nuts. But anyway, so I've decided that's a problem. The math just doesn't add up. And so instead of using feeling crappy about something based on my thoughts to get myself to solve a problem, I can be compassionate and gentle with myself and still decide I want to solve the problem, right? The opposite is true of the idea of I have to feel crummy about it to change it. Positive emotion actually fuels positive action. So if you go back to how our brain works, if you're thinking a positive thought and feeling a positive emotion, your brain's going to want more of that because your brain likes to feel positive emotions. So it's going to do everything it can to feel in a positive way. So take another look at your list of emotions and ask yourself, how is it that I actually want to be feeling right now about this situation? I'm not even going to label it a problem anymore. Okay. What's the emotion you'd rather be feeling than the emotion you're currently feeling about your situation? And write it down. Pop it in the comments. Yeah, peace, certainty, calm, neutral. Yeah, I always like neutral. Sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves, like, I want to be feeling joyous about this problem, but you don't have to. You can feel neutral. So the feeling I want to be feeling right now is, without anything having to change, I am in control of how I feel, and I can decide to feel this emotion despite the circumstances. You are always in control. Actually, I'm not going to say that because that could be another reason to beat yourself up. But you always have the ability to choose what to think and feel. Now, this is the point where I get into my life is 50-50 speech, because oftentimes people who are new to thought work think, okay, well, if I control my thoughts and control my emotions, I should feel good all the time. But that's not true. Life is 50-50, right? Without the good, you wouldn't notice the bad. Wait, I think I got that backwards. But it works both ways, right? So without the bad, you wouldn't notice the good. You wouldn't notice that the good is good. Life, at the end of our lives, if you looked back at your whole life and did an evaluation, you probably would notice that half the time you felt good, half the time you felt crummy. So the whole point of thought work isn't to change your thinking so you feel good all the time, because really that's impossible. And quite frankly, there are times when we don't want to feel good, right? The death of someone we love, we're not going to want to be like, oh, look on the bright side. We can feel positive about this. Sometimes it's completely appropriate to feel crummy. Okay. So you're in control of how you feel, and you can decide to feel an emotion despite the circumstances or because of the circumstances, whatever you decide. So you can decide if your problem is actually a problem. You can decide how you think about it, how you feel about it, and you can decide how you want to feel about it, and then decide how to think about it based on how you want to feel. Now, if any of this is feeling confusing, if it's like, oh my gosh, this is all totally new to me, or if you want to dig a little bit deeper, we can always talk more about it. This is what I spend at least 3 months working with clients on, because it's a new way of thinking. Nobody ever teaches you how to feel your feelings, how to identify your thoughts, how to be aware of all of these things, but it is a game changer. Okay, so to review, the problem that you're currently having is a feeling caused by a thought. It's not because of your circumstance. The reason it's a problem for you is because you would rather be feeling a different emotion than you are. So at this point, you might be tempted to think that the only way to change how you're feeling is to change the circumstances or the facts of your problem. I have $20 in my bank account. I'm just going to change that and find some money. A lot of people think this with their jobs. Like they think that their jobs are making them feel unhappy. If the job is the circumstance, then the unhappiness is coming from thoughts, right? And so a lot of people are like, okay, well, then I'll just change my job. But you will always have a human brain, which often will require, sorry, my watch is beeping at me. Having a human brain will always require thought management. So simply changing your job, you're still going to bring the same brain with you to the new job and all of the same thoughts and beliefs. And so no matter what happens in the future, you're always going to have to learn how to manage your thinking. So anyway, remember, feelings are caused by your thinking. Each thought creates a feeling. So the only way to change how you're feeling is to change your thinking. Now, granted, it would be much easier to change your thoughts if your circumstances changed, but that isn't necessary. Often it's possible to change your circumstances immediately, but it's always possible to change your thinking in order to get what you want. And what you want is always, ultimately, the way that you're feeling. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is, keeping in mind that what you want is always related to how you want to feel, write down, I would rather be feeling blank, whatever emotion you'd like to be feeling, positive, neutral, hopeful, clear. I'd rather be feeling blank when it comes to this problem. In order to change how I'm feeling, I would need to change my thinking. So my question for you is, do you believe this is possible? Why or why not? Post it in the comments. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, theoretically, you're getting it. Okay. Yeah, and this is a tool. So keep in mind that the thought model and managing your mind is a tool that you can use to help you. I firmly believe in it, which is, I've used it as a tool to change my own life and to deal with the problems that come up in my life. So thinking about whatever your problem is, whether it's a concrete problem you came to this class with, or it's a hypothetical problem and you're just looking for some new tools in your toolbox, think about the impact of emotions and how emotions create all of your actions and how your actions create all of your results. So changing, my brain just went a bunch of different directions there. changing how you want to feel requires you to change how you think. Okay. So when we're having quote unquote problems in our lives, we often compound them by reacting to our emotions. So we have a negative thought based on our circumstances, and this negative thought creates a negative emotion. And since our emotions drive all of our actions, when we're thinking and feeling negatively, we compound our problem by creating evidence for our thinking with our actions. So let me give you an example. So let's say you're in a fight with your partner and you're thinking your partner is being a jerk. You feel angry because you're thinking this, and that anger will now drive your behavior. So you might make cold, snide remarks to your partner. You might distance yourself. You might possibly cause them to react, thereby giving you more evidence that they're a jerk. So the model always works. You have your circumstance, and the circumstance is inherently neutral until you think a thought about it. And then that thought drives an emotion in your body. And because your brain wants to get more positive emotions or avoid feeling negative emotions, all of your actions are driven from that emotion. And then from our actions, we get our results. Okay, so here's the work we've done on your problem so far. So your circumstance, go ahead and list the main fact of your problem. Then list the number one thought, the most kind of stand out thought, the thought that's feeling most resonant for you about your problem. And then write down the feeling that that thought causes. When you think that thought, you feel, write it down. And then what are all the actions you take when you're feeling that way? So for example, if you are thinking your partner is acting like a jerk and you're feeling angry, what are all the actions you're taking from a place of anger? And then how do those actions contribute to your problem? What evidence are you creating for your thought by acting this way? Sometimes the action is actually an inaction fueled by the thought. Inaction looks like avoidance, procrastination, lack of energy, forgetting, indecision, overwhelm. So notice how inaction can also create evidence for the thought you're having creating your problem. So let me give you another example. Let's say your problem is that this is a thought that it's a problem that you've gained 10 pounds and you think that that makes you fat. When you think that thought, you feel shame. When you feel shame, you disconnect from your body and avoid exercise. This gives you further evidence for the idea that your body is fat and it's not fit and capable. By avoiding exercise or taking the inaction of not exercising, you create a body that produces more evidence for that negative thought. Now, keep in mind, there's another layer to this about societal expectations of what our bodies look like, about how you actually feel in your body, all the things. But I feel like weight seems to be an example that a lot of people can really get on board with. So go back to the page where you wrote the feeling you would rather be feeling instead of the one that you are feeling. And then on the next page, write down how your actions would be different if you were able to feel this new way instead. So for example, if you gained the COVID-15 and you are feeling that your body is overweight and unhealthy, that's creating probably a negative emotion like shame, like in the last example. And from that place of shame, you're doing all of these actions to avoid feeling the shame. Oftentimes that includes eating more, exercising less. And then the result is that you either gain more weight or you don't lose the weight that you gained. But let's imagine that you gained the COVID-15 and you felt neutral about it. Your thought was, yeah, so did everybody else. Then if you're feeling neutral, you might act differently, right? Like you might be more inclined to go out for a walk because it's a nice day. You might be less inclined to eat the entire bag of M&Ms because you're not reacting to shame, okay? So how might these actions give you a different result to your problem? If you were feeling blank instead of feeling blank, this is in your workbook, I would be acting differently. Write about it below. Really explore the possibility in all your thoughts about it, okay? The next step of problem solving, which we're not going to get into in this class, but we'll get into in the future at some point, is other people. But I want to leave you with the thought about how often we try to control other people when we think other people are the problem or other people are causing our problems. And keeping in mind that whatever somebody else does or says is a circumstance, okay? It's a fact. Your partner said words. Your boss sent you an email. Your boss didn't reply to an email. We make all of these things mean so many different things about ourselves, and we make them a problem. But really, since we can't control our circumstances, that means we can't control other people. So I see so many of my clients spending so much of their time and energy trying to control other people that it's just not something that we can do, no more than other people can control us. So that can be groundbreaking in and of itself, right? We can influence other people. We can try to influence other people, but at the end of the day, they are other humans with their own thoughts and feelings. So I won't get too deep into that, but just keep in mind that being aware of the fact that you're trying to control somebody else or you want to control somebody else in order for you to feel better about something that's happening. It's good to know that you just can't do that. Okay. So anyway, so we went over a lot today. And hopefully you found this workshop helpful. I found this work revolutionary in and of itself, but it does take practice. It's not like you take a 45-minute workshop and then you're like, oh, I totally get it. It's a practice, right? And so I wanted to introduce you to the idea of the thought model and managing your thinking to get the results that you want in life. And so if this work interests you and you want to talk about it more and you'd like my help with applying it specifically to your own life, I would love to chat with you. I love doing this work. You can go to my website, which is amandaryanfear.com/apply and book a free 1-hour phone call with me. And we can talk about what your problem is, talk about how it's keeping you stuck, what you'd like to do, and further talk about how we can apply these concepts to your life. So if that interests you, I encourage you to book a call. And if you would like to learn more about this work, I do have another cohort coming up of my 12-week coaching program, Reset, where you have a chance to learn all of the ins and outs of thought management, as well as learn tools for decision making, how to get out of perfectionism, how to work with other people. And by work with them, I mean be with other people, family members, coworkers, friends, all of the things. So if you're ready to stop feeling overwhelmed and stuck, and you'd like to get some clarity on what you actually want from your life and to start feeling better, let's talk. Same link. You can book a link to apply, and we will talk about how to change your life in the way that you want to change it. So thank you so much for attending, and I look forward to seeing you in the future. Bye.